Hello and welcome to the Gaggle What We Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. Peter, I was thinking the other day that some countries get lucky, some countries don't. The United States dodged a bullet in 2016 when he didn't elect Hillary Clinton. I mean, that could have been a global catastrophe there and then. It seemed like it was a done deal, and nothing can stop Hillary Clinton. And I think really dodged a bullet. The British weren't so fortunate. I mean, it's been known for many years that Boris Johnson was manifestly unsuitable for any senior governmental position. I mean, he had shown himself to be a totally incompetent individual throughout most of his career. But he can continue to succeed upwards. And, in 2017, again, the British avoided. They got Theresa May, but she was so terrible, and she kind of imploded that eventually they couldn't avoid it. And I got Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson proved to be as catastrophic as we had expected. I mean, so much so that almost unique. I don't think anytime it's happened, his own party just tossed him out. I mean, it's not. I mean, sometimes you've had prime ministers being replaced within the cabinet, but the entire parliamentary party just saying he's got to go. We can't take it.
He was catastrophic on every single level. It wasn't like he had a policy error or something like. I mean, his private life, his public presentation, I mean, everything across the board.
Exactly.
That's what that engendered that, the nuclear option against him. Okay,
and it was a nuclear option. And ironically, he's attempted to come back since. After the downfall of who was it? His successor,
Liz Truss.
Liz Truss, after the downfall of
Yay, Liz! Oh, we had so much potential material with you. Oh.
He thought, oh, I'll come back. And I thought, oh my God, no, not Johnson. And so, the party quickly rallied around Rishi Sunak. But the horror show that is Johnson is most clearly apparent in his Ukraine policy. He embraced the Ukraine policy, fancying himself to be some kind of a Churchill, Winston Churchill. This is, again, Johnson. He's never done any military service himself, so he's going around posturing that he's some great wartime leader, but he's again avoided doing any military service himself.
Well, he wants to live vicariously through Zelensky.
Exactly.
That's how he sees his inner Churchill. He wants Zelensky to express his inner Churchill, so he can get the limelight. Okay, the afterglow.
Right. That's right. Exactly. So during the Tucker's interview with Putin, the subject of Boris Johnson came up, and Putin told the familiar story of the Istanbul negotiations that were close to completion, and everyone was close to an agreement until Boris Johnson flew into Kiev and told Zelensky, "Hey, don't do it." And in fact, the Putin didn't mention it. The story was he told Zelensky, well, you can sign what you like, but we, the British and the Americans, we're not going to recognize anything that you sign. I mean, basically that was what he said. It's not a deal that we will recognize. So he laid it on the line, and of course Johnson has gone into print. He now has a column at the Daily Mail. Obviously, he's getting paid, I don't know, probably a couple of million a year just to write this a column at the Mail, in which he's sort of blood of hot air, Hitler, Churchill, the usual. Tucker is, Lord Haw-Haw, exactly what you would expect. But the interesting thing is that Johnson has never really denied that this is what happened. And in fact, none of Johnson's champions ever really denied that it happened, that there was a deal that was close, and that it was he who sabotaged it. So just want to show you, here is the Times, which is again, Murdoch, rag, and here was a story that was recent. That was before the Putin interview, and this is the headline: Johnson embroiled in war of words over sabotaged Ukraine peace deal. So again,
why is it in quote? Why is it in air quotes?
exactly. Yeah. Former Prime Minister dismisses the allegation that he ordered President Zelensky to continue war as total nonsense and Russian propaganda.
Well, I don't know if I would use the word ordered. You don't have to when you have somebody that in such a weak position. Okay.
Yeah.
It's again, it's, you got a nice country here. It'd be a shame something happened to
right.
it. I mean, is that an order?
Right. Exactly. So that's it. It's like, what part of it are you quibbling with? He's going to say, yeah, I didn't order him. No, I didn't order. But basically, he's told, whatever agreement you come to, we aren't going to recognize it. So that's it. Therefore, as far as we're concerned, we're going to keep this war going. And then he says, in recent months, Moscow has accused Johnson of vetoing an agreement that he says would have led to Russia withdrawing troops in exchange for Kiev abandoning its aspirations to join NATO and pledging neutrality.
Not true. Not true. We have the former Israeli prime minister that has said this. Okay. We have other witnesses.
Exactly, and that's what.
Exactly. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The Israeli prime minister, and as we will see, the Ukrainians themselves have said this.
The Turks, and then finally the
Turks
Ukrainians
as well. Exactly. The Turkish foreign minister said this. Yeah, and then, but again, what do you expect from Murdoch? Maria Zaharova, blah blah. Last year, that Johnson had ordered Zelensky. See, again, they're doing it in a way which makes the argument stupid, as if somehow they have to order Zelensky not to agree to any peace deal with Moscow. Johnson banned Kiev from signing a peace agreement with Russia following negotiations in Istanbul and demanded the continuation of hostilities against Russia. Again, this is the way they present it. And then Moscow's allegations were prompted by comments made by David Arhamia, who was Ukraine's lead negotiator at talks in Belarus and Turkey with Russian officials in the early months of the war. Arhamia, senior MP who was Zelensky's servant of the people, party told Ukrainian media in November that Moscow's main aim at the talks was to force Ukraine to formally renounce its NATO ambitions. When you put it like that, you think, well, why is that? why is that such a problem? And because then this is quoting him, Rahman, he said, they really hoped almost to the last that they would pressure us into signing an agreement to accept neutrality. This was the most important thing for them, to be ready to end the war. If we accepted, as Finland once did, neutrality and pledged that we will not join NATO, he said. And then
which it seems completely plausible. I mean, that's why I'm not saying anything. I mean,
no.
What's to interrogate there?
That's right, exactly. He's stressed. So this is him. This is his talking. This isn't Zaharova. He stressed, however, that the Ukrainian delegation had no trust in Russia and that it had lacked the authority to accept Moscow's terms. Well, what does it matter?
Who did? Who did? Right, exactly. Why were you sent there if you didn't have any authority?
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, the trust. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you have trust or anyone. That's why, we have Reagan famously, trust but verify. I mean, you don't have to trust anyone, but you have to have some mechanism for verifying something. And then even if it had wanted to, it lacked authority to accept Moscow's terms, even if it had wanted to. But then again, as you say, well, then why are you negotiating if you don't have the authority to accept the terms? I mean, and it says Ukraine's ambitions to secure membership of NATO are written into the country's constitution. Okay, well, Arhamia also said that after the talks, Johnson advised Ukraine's leadership that it should, quote, not sign anything with Russia at all, and let's just fight.
And let's us just fight. Well, who's the us here? It's the Ukrainians.
That's right. It's a real classic. Let's you and him fight.
Yeah.
Let me hold your jacket for you. Russian officials have cited Arahamia's interview as evidence that Ukraine is controlled by Western puppet masters. Well, I mean, there's nothing here that refutes that.
I mean, maybe you don't like the puppet masters. I don't care. You don't like that word? That's okay with me. It doesn't change the meaning.
Right. And I also don't know when they put this quotes around it. I mean, are you actually quoting someone directly? I mean, it was no. Johnson has now responded to Moscow's claims that he wrecked a peace deal. This is nothing but total nonsense and Russian propaganda. I mean, Johnson just has, he only has one tone. He told the Times. He also said that during the discussion with Zelensky after the Istanbul talks, he had been concerned about the nature of any potential agreement and had pledged that Britain would support Ukraine 1,000%. Now, right away said he had been concerned about the nature of any potential agreement. That's it. That's exactly what we were saying, that he's concerned. In other words, he's telling Zelensky, we aren't going to accept this. So he had concerns. Why are you having concerns? You're over there, in the UK, it's a long way away. Why are you the one who's having concerns about this potential agreement?
Well, and also, I mean, this is like a quid pro quo. I mean, if you do this, this will be the result. If you do that, that'll be another result. So essentially, to support Ukraine 1,000%, if you don't go into negotiation, I mean, it's a binary here.
Right. That's right. I was a bit worried at that stage. I could not see for the life of me what the deal could be. And I thought that any deal with Putin was going to be pretty sordid. He should know something about sordidness.
Well, I didn't know that he was Ukraine's ambassador here.
Yeah, that's a strange.
Again, wait, so you're part of the conflict? You're not a part of the conflict? Can you make up your mind?
Right.
I mean, he's for the life of me, like what the deal could be. I mean, you were the Prime Minister of the UK.
Exactly. What's it got to do with you?
What's it got to do with you?
Right. That's exactly right. Then Johnson's denials were echoed by Arahamian, who said that Russia deliberately distorted his comments to support its own narratives about the war. So now Arahamian says,
he's got in line. He's got in line.
Exactly. But what the things you've said confirms everything we know.
But we have other people that have confirmed this. We don't need just these two actors.
Exactly. We'll talk about that, what other people have said, other Ukrainians have said. And then it's Johnson's, quote, just fight, unquote, comments were made in the context of consultations with Ukraine's Western allies about how to combat Russian invasion, he said. He also insisted that it would have been impossible for any Western officials to issue orders to Zelensky.
Yeah, but Ukraine was fighting. Okay, so why do you have to say it? Because they were fighting. This is about ending the fighting.
Exactly.
So,
but again, you see, what they're trying to do here is get bogged down with semantics. Oh, well,
that's why they do the air quotes, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, well, it was impossible for any Western officials to issue orders to Zelensky. Well, of course, it's impossible. Yes, I mean, there isn't a hierarchy whereby Zelensky has to obey orders from London. I mean, that isn't really the issue. And then neither then nor now do any of our Western partners give Ukraine instructions on how to build its defenses or what political decisions to take. That is the sovereign right of the Ukrainian leadership.
Yeah, well, what was
reading from the script?
Yeah, what was Victoria Nuland doing in Kiev last week? Oh, there was Zaluzhny's out. Oh, yes. That's just pure coincidental.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Of all people to show up last week.
Exactly. Yeah, Victoria Nuland. Yeah. And then he added, no peace proposals or peace agreement were possible in February or March 2022. Russia entered Ukraine solely for the sake of seizing territories, killing citizens, and overthrowing a democratic government. There were no other goals. But you just said something completely opposite. You just said a moment ago the deal was neutrality. He said that's exactly the opposite of what he had just been saying. So he comes along, says one thing, and then when they press him, was that it? So you mean a deal was possible on the basis of neutrality? Just renounce your NATO membership? Oh no, they were overthrowing democratic government. They wanted to seize territory. The main task of the Ukrainian delegation was obvious: to achieve at least a 24 or 48-hour ceasefire. Why?
Yeah, but George, he said no peace proposals no peace proposal or peace agreement were possible in February or March of 2022. So what were they doing in Istanbul?
Right, exactly. And what is this? What's this 24 or 48-hour ceasefire? Well, what's the point of that? Well,
I've never heard of that. Have
right,
you?
yeah. And after Johnson's visit to Kiev, Downing Street said that he had, quote, urged against any negotiation with Russia on terms that gave credence to the Kremlin's false narrative for the invasion, but stressed that this was a decision for the Ukrainian government. So
they just want to have it both ways, don't they? Yeah.
They urged against any negotiation with Russia on terms that gave credence to the Kremlin's false narrative. Well, what does that mean? I mean, in other words, then that what they, I mean, if it is kind of what a NATO membership, essentially it said, no, you cannot renounce NATO membership because that would give credence to their false narrative. Well, why? It's not a false narrative. I mean, they've been repeating this for years, decades. So what's this, a false narrative? I mean, in other words, your false narrative, everyone must accept your false narrative. Oh, it's about Putin's imperial conquest, he's Hitler, blah,
Not about dangerously expanding NATO.
Exactly. No. Now, this is an interview with Arestovich, who was was close to Putin and is now running for president. Well, I guess there's no election, but I think he wants to run for president. And so he gave this interview to Unheard, and this guy FS is this Freddie Sale. I think he's the owner of it anyway. So Sale asks, do you think that bilateral negotiations between Ukraine and Russia could have worked earlier in the process? There has been a lot of discussion around those early months when negotiations in Istanbul. Yeah, I was a member of the Istanbul process, and it was the most profitable agreement we could have done. They concluded that two previous agreements were extremely dangerous for Ukraine, Minsk I and Minsk II. The agreements even contained the question of Crimea. It took 10 years of discussion, 15 years of discussion on the status of Crimea, and it meant security for the Black Sea. But now I don't know, because mid-agreement in Istanbul, we came to Kiev, and after Bucha, we heard from the president that we had stopped the negotiations. The next meeting was supposed to be the 9th of April, and on the 2nd of April, it was declined. Then he goes on, so you came back from Istanbul thinking the negotiation had been successful. Yeah, completely. We opened the champagne bottle. We had discussed demilitarization, denazifications, issues concerning the Russian language, Russian church, and much else. And that month, it was a question of the amount of Ukrainian armed forces in peacetime. And President Zelensky said, I could decide this question indirectly with Mr. Putin. The Istanbul agreements were a protocol of intentions and was 90% prepared for directly meeting with Putin. This was to be the next step of negotiations.
Is this a Putin talking point, George?
It's a Putin talking point, yeah. And Tucker just accepted it because he's just a useful idiot for Kremlin propaganda. Yeah. So this is very explicit. This is more explicit than anything. I mean, he said, "Hey, these are all the issues that we had already agreed on." He said 90%. This is what Putin said in the Kremlin when he met those African Union leaders. And then Sale asked him, well, what was the sequence and how did Bucha derail that process? I really do not know. The president was shocked about Bucha. All of us were shocked about Bucha. I was in Bucha on the second day when the Russian forces were repelled. Zelensky completely changed face when he came into Bucha and saw what had happened. A lot of people say it was the Prime Minister Boris Johnson who came to Kiev and put a stop to this negotiation with Russia. I don't know exactly if that is true or false. He came to Kiev, but nobody knows what they spoke about except, I think, Zelensky and Boris Johnson himself. And then I think it was the 2nd of April, and I was in Bucha the next day. The president got in one day later, so it could have been the 4th of April, and the next meeting was to be on the 9th. So something happened in those 5 days, but the members of the negotiations group stopped any negotiations. When we asked how it could be restarted, the president said, quote, somewhere, sometime, but not now. But so he brings up Bucha, but he doesn't really know, well, what has Bucha got to do with anything? Why, I mean, leave aside everything. Even if you were to accept that whole story about Bucha, why are you stopping the negotiations? And that's why, it's obviously Johnson's visit that was crucial. And then says, so something changed Zelensky's mind. Yes, absolutely. And historians will have to find an answer to what happened. And then he says, but do you think Russia was even sincere? Would they even have stuck to that negotiated settlement? The Russians showed their readiness for continuing the negotiations, and we declined. But now, after 2 years, I think it would be unreal to make an agreement this time. Putin has changed this Russian-Ukrainian war into an anti-colonial war, the global South against the global West, and the systemic oppositions between West and South are so huge. It includes the question of the Israeli-Palestine war, the question of Taiwan. It could not be solved by an agreement between Ukraine and Russia. It needs to take place at a much higher level. I think that's it, yeah. So Aristovich, I think he's always struck me as being a rather smart guy. But you get the sense here that, of course, it was Johnson. That was the crucial thing. He there it was that we have the date, the sequence of the dates. He said, I was part of the negotiation team. We were almost there, 90% of the way there. We were ready, to meet and to sign the agreement on the 9th. What happened? Well, Johnson. What happened?
And obviously, the importance of that, as we speak today, is that agreement could never be realized today.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a good deal,
right?
And I think I think I don't know. It can kind of play Monday morning football, but I probably would have thought it's not a great deal, but it ended the fighting.
I wouldn't have thought that. We don't know the exact details of it, but from what Putin was suggesting, or at least before, it didn't look like a great deal. But there it was. I mean, you can at least argue that that deal, they said, okay, well, at least it bring the war to an end. But it wasn't a great deal. But
it was a good deal for the Ukrainians.
Very good deal. And he says that we were opening the bottles of champagne. I mean, when you're opening up bottles of champagne, they will think this is a great deal for us. We can't believe it.
Well, in this part of the world, you open up a bottle of champagne when you're at the finish line. Okay.
Right.
I mean that culturally, it's bad luck. We know you keep it chilled. We're not there yet. Seriously, folks. Seriously.
Yeah. Okay? No, you're absolutely right, because Russians tend to be a little bit pessimistic.
And superstitious.
And rightly so. Yeah. That's so they want to keep it chilled. But so we've got this this record. And it just shows what an absolute horrific, shower and terrible person, Boris Johnson. And it's all across the board, again, his personal life. I mean, it itself is a reflection of the sort of person that he was.
Well, isn't it interesting? Here's a guy that really hasn't succeeded at anything in life. Okay, he's a flamboyant writer, okay? I mean, if you like that style.
It's a low-level skill. I mean, no question he has a skill, but it's still low level.
But he's made a living off of it, okay? Yeah. I give him credit there. But what he tried to do is that he tried to leave his mark on history because he feels that he's destined to do that or something. Well, you went out there, you went to bat, dude, and you struck out in so many different ways.
Right.
Okay? No prudence, no caution, and really punching way above your weight. You had no business in doing that, committing so many lives that would end up being destroyed. So, I mean, this is the worst kind of charlatan,
Well, exactly. And he was a charlatan. I mean, he never, when you look back, the way he battened onto the whole Brexit movement, he had never been particularly pro-Brexit. He battened onto it, made himself as if the central figure in Brexit. Then he tried to market himself as the British Trump, a kind of a populist. He was nothing of the sort. He was always a member of the sort of the cocktail party set. And then once he became prime minister, he was just a total disaster, embracing the green agenda and
his inner feminism,
the inner feminism, the hysteria about COVID, it was one of the worst hysterics. And then he got onto Ukraine for no reason at all.
And he stays with it. He's a paid lobbyist.
He's a paid lobbyist, and he's going. He comes over to the United States. Again, it seems to me this is a regular thing of these European politicians, failed European politicians, who keep coming to Washington to berate the Republicans. They come to lecture the Republicans. I mean, I think Republicans are just going to start. We're not going to listen to this. I mean, who the hell are you to come here and start lecturing us?
Well, particularly, you're no Winston Churchill, okay?
Right.
I mean, if you were of that stature, people would. It'd be standing room only, but you're not. You're not.
Yeah.
Okay. No, but this entire neoliberal ideology doesn't allow anyone like that to come to the top. It doesn't allow it. You do something else. You go into real estate. You become a rock star. You become a Instagram influencer. The last place you go is politics, because there's no way to grow. You have to conform.
Right.
With exceptions like Trump that can make a breakthrough, okay?
Yes.
With exceptions like Erdogan, because he has the backing of the people. That's enough for him to. But it's a small country. He's a small guy, okay?
That's right. Exactly. But what Johnson is now doing is that, being this kind of foreign policy maven, that gives him a kind of a global profile, and he obviously hopes to use it to elevate himself, a return to British politics. I think it's a completely stupid idea. He's never going to be. The British are done with him. He's never coming back. But it is something that's not. If you can recall, Margaret Thatcher, who was very unhappy about being kicked out by her own party, also dreamt of coming back, and she also seized on foreign policy as her route back to power. And she really didn't know much about foreign policy. I mean, she knew the Soviet Union's bad, and communism is a bad thing. But when
Falkland's good.
Exactly. But once she sort of looked into the post-Soviet era and said, "Well, what should I do? What position shall I take?" And suddenly, hey, I hate the Serbs. We need to bomb the Serbs. That didn't do her any good, and nobody wanted her back. She'd had her innings, and that's it. Nobody wants you back. And so if the great Thatcher, who had a huge reputation, if she couldn't come back, Johnson is not coming back.
Obviously they have these delusions of, again, invoking Churchill, because Churchill did come back, and he should not have come back.
He should not have come back. Exactly.
He should not have come back. I don't think it. I don't know. I'm not a Brit, but I don't think it tarnished his reputation all that much coming back. But he ended with a whimper. Okay.
Yeah, ended with a whimper. Interestingly, though, when he did come back in his second term in office, he was kind of a dove. He actually famously said, "Georgia is better than war." He kind of now. Maybe he was an opportunist. He wanted to be again at the center of attention in other Yalta, in other Potsdam, and so on. But he was advocating negotiations with the Soviet Union. So he wasn't doing the Fulton thing, Iron Curtain and so on. So he wanted negotiations. But you're absolutely right. He was already well past his best, to say the least. But again, that was Churchill. Johnson has this weighing on him. He's not going to be able to get rid of this story about the Istanbul talks and the role he played in destroying them. So he can come to Washington and berate them, but everyone's all the Republicans, they know about the story of what you did. That's his historic legacy.
Like I said, he wanted to leave a huge imprint on history, and he screwed it up. I mean, royally. Right. I mean, look, his legacy is already indelible. Okay, this is a opportunist that is desperate right now. And again, if he wants to pull a Churchill, I mean, you're right, George. You know, Churchill was a bit more dovish, but I think there was a political ploy there, is to be kind of a third voice, a third base, a third axis. You know, mediation and all of that. Well, by the time he came back, you know, no offense to our viewers, but it was no longer Great Britain. It was Little England. Okay. And it has been Little England ever since.
You're exactly right. And I think he was kind of hurt by it, but also it was but he was more responsible for that than anyone else, because the reason why Britain had become so weak and so small and so subordinate to the United States is the policy that he pursued. I mean, is that, you know, you're going to go to war. There was no other way you could fight Germany other than becoming completely subordinate to the United States. He didn't like it. And I think that's why he wanted, oh, we'll have the big three, you know, sitting around the table and so on. But by now, the Americans said, no, you're no longer part of the big three.
And
there is no more big three.
And plus, the UK then was bankrupt. It was, you know, you remember, you know, they were groveling for money, and you know, and Truman said, "Hell no, it's done. Okay, it's done deal. Maybe the Marshall Plan, that'll be something else." But also, you have to remember, you know, there was these great relationships. You know, Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill. There's many books about it. No, Roosevelt wasn't a really big fan of Winston Churchill, because Winston Churchill I want you to underwrite our empire, and Roosevelt said, no, we're not going to do that. No. You know, by the way, the rest of the islands you have in the Caribbean, hand them over, okay? Hand them over. Thank you very much. Okay. Oh, we'll give you 50 rusted
50 aging
boats.
Destroyers. Yeah. You can't hand everything over. Yeah.
No, and Roosevelt was really adamant about that. I'm not trying to make Roosevelt out to be a virtuous person. He's actually, Roosevelt, for his greatness, is one of the most mediocre people you could ever meet. Okay, he was not particularly bright. He wasn't bright in any sense. No. Okay, no. He had a vision, and you know. And I give him that. He gave people hope, even though the New Deal probably extended the Great Depression. Okay, but you know, the thinking that you can get a second coming with American help, well, never count on that.
No, that's exactly right. And I think that the position of FDR, the position of the Americans, was that, well, you essentially you lost. I mean, you know, that was his view to the French. Well, you lost in 1940. Well, you lose a war, you pay the price. I mean, you know, you lost, so you're going to have to dissolve your empires, you know. And they made it clear to the Dutch, you're going to have to leave Indonesia, and they made to the French, you're going to have to leave Indochina, and the British was again, well, you know, you don't have any money. How are you going to run Palestine? You can't run Palestine. You got all these other, you know, things that you picked up here and there, like India. You know, you're not going to run any of those places. So boom, you know, the aftermath of World War II was the dissolution of the empire.
Well, and also, you know, we have this almost kind of like fairy tale. Hollywood loves it, you know. The victors in the Second World War. Of course, it was the United States won, and the British won. Well, for the British, it was kind of a draw at best. At best, it was a draw. Okay, at least they could, you know, mouth off at the United Nations Security Council for a couple more decades. Okay,
right.
But no. I mean, if you look at the outcome of the Second World War, it was the United States and the Soviet Union that won, and Europe lost.
Right.
All of Europe lost.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And I think that why the sort of embrace of Churchill is so bizarre, because if you really are a British nationalist, you really want, what you want is to make Great Britain, you know, great, then there was only one way they could do it, which is to avoid World War II. You know, again, Hitler, Nazism, these were terrible regimes, awful, and everything else. No one liked it. No one liked any aspect of Hitler. But if you are a leader of Great Britain and you want to stay a great power, then you have only one option, which is, we got to stay out of this war, you know, gradually, you know, grow in strength, and, you know, wait for the appropriate moment. But if you get into a war, against Germany, then you're going to pay a huge price. And that's what happened. And so to worship Churchill, who essentially was responsible for the dissolution of
the
British
empire.
power. Yeah.
And he was one of the greatest British imperialists.
Yeah.
Okay. He was ultra racist, bigoted, and he was an empire man, big time.
Yeah.
And for George and I, at least, there's an interesting parallel because he's like the Gorbachev of the British Empire. I mean, for someone that had come up through, so Gorbachev came up through the Communist Party, Soviet Union, and Churchill did the same thing, and both of them dissolved what they so supremely wanted to be atop of.
Exactly. And that's why, for Johnson, to go around, I want to be a Churchill. Well, okay, well, you're a Churchill. But what do you do? You go around, berating the Americans. Hey, you must go on fighting this war. It's doing you a lot of good. I mean, it's such an absurd position. These Republicans who tell him, well, what's in it for us? I mean, he has obviously Republicans who listen to him, like, Mitch McConnell and the rest. But the Republicans he's trying to persuade, they say, well, it's got nothing to do with us. I mean, it's just what we've got our own problems to deal with, and we have lots of them. Ukraine is not one of them.
Well, in 1941, 1942, with Churchill meeting with Franklin Roosevelt, you'd want to be a senator to be in that picture. Okay. You would want that for posterity, to show your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Who wants a photo up with Boris Johnson? For God's sake, the man won't even comb his hair.
That's right. Yeah. No, exactly. I really don't think so.
And George, the problem with these, historical figures, people want to be like them, but there's only one. It never duplicates. It just doesn't. Okay. And again, this is just this kind of Hollywood fantasy nonsense. It doesn't happen.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. There's only one, and if you try to do that, it's not going to work. I mean, it's like Liz Truss. Oh, I'm the new Thatcher. Well, nobody wants a new Thatcher. So that she fell flat on her face right away. And so Johnson, we're going to Churchill, but nobody really wants Churchill anymore. I mean, I think Churchill's reputation has, undergone an enormous reevaluation over the decades. So it's bizarre. I mean, at least in Great Britain it has. I mean, maybe not in the United States, but in Great Britain it's going to. So the moment you've got to bring up, oh, I want to be a new Churchill, that already kind of turns people off. It's a stupid thing to do. One other thing, just a slight tangential. He had, in that article in the Daily Mail, he attacks George Galloway. For George Galloway's sycophantic to Saddam Hussein and everything else. It's not a good idea to bring up the invasion of Iraq and George Galloway. I mean, people who watched that extraordinary performance by Galloway when he went before the Senate. Senator Carl Levin, and I think Norm Coleman was the Republican. And Galloway just let fly about it. So, if we're going to talk about who was right and who was wrong about that invasion, Johnson needs to shut up.
He just steps in it all of the time. The fewer words said, the better for this guy. Okay. Right. Keep your grift with Ukraine, and it'll pay the bills. Like, you get your column. Be happy with your little victories, okay? I mean, because you've written yourself out of the script of history. Right. And most likely, George, for all the foibles of this guy and his checkered past and behavior, Boris Johnson, you're going to go down in history for what you said when you went to Ukraine. That is what you're going to be remembered for. Exactly. Forever.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, this journalism thing, again, is part of his Churchill shtick. Hey,
do I know anything that he wrote? Can you tell me anything? I can't.
No, I can't. No.
Nothing memorable.
No, I don't
sometimes it's cute. It's, a play on words. It's cute.
Right.
It's so
right. Well, again, as you said, he has a skill as a journalist, as a tabloid journalist. I mean, it's not a he's not even on as a journalist. He's not on the level of Churchill as a journalist, but
True.
he's a pretty decent tabloid journalist. Kind of scabrous, vulgar, nasty. He knows how to do that and makes a lot of money at it. But the notion that this is going to somehow resuscitate his political career, the way he did Churchill's. No. That's what he's going to be known for. This tawdry, repugnant journalism, and of course, as you said, that what he did in
well, that type of journalism is a good reflection of the political culture in the West.
Right.
That's really they mirror each other.
Right.
That's the intellectual capacity that we have right now. That's why, and George and I, we talked about it on my program today. We made a video about it. That's why everybody's hair is on fire because of Tucker's interview with Putin, because the other side of the story that you're not supposed to talk about was talked about. Okay, you can disagree with everything the Russian president had to. I have no problem with that, but he did say it. And what do you say to what he had to say?
That's right.
Okay. Yep. And just because Boris Johnson wants to be Winston Churchill, why should I be bestirred whatsoever? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, why don't you, if you want to be somebody great, why don't you be the greatest Boris Johnson you can be? No, you failed at that. You failed supremely at that. So don't try to imitate somebody else.
That's right. That's right. So that's why, their best resort is, well, how can we ban Tucker Carlson? Is there some mechanism whereby we can just sort of ban him? Sort of people not have access to it. And then, I think people are going to try. I don't know if they can succeed, but they will try to, make this.
All I can say, Tucker and Justin Wells and your entire team, and it's something I talked about with George before, make sure you control your own servers. Okay. Don't let Bezos control your servers like he almost all the other ones he does. Okay. Make sure from top to bottom, you've got a tight run operation. Okay. Because if you do, Tucker's stock just went up. Okay. If you're investing in Tucker Carlson Network, you're going to make some metaphorical money.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's the way. That's what Alex Jones did.
That's right.
You get your own service. Otherwise, you're gonna rely upon Amazon and Jeff Bezos. They're gonna come after you and destroy you. So you're absolutely right. But yeah, I mean that's the people like Johnson again, posing as Churchill freedom, Constitution, liberty, and what a total frauds, absolute, the worst kind of frauds, and the consequences we have to live with. And as I say,
right,
we dodged a bullet with Hillary Clinton. The British didn't dodge a bullet with Johnson. I mean, they should have seen him a mile off and had nothing to do with him. They didn't. And then the British have paid the price. Everyone else has paid the price too.
Yeah, well, if that's if Boris Johnson is your last resort option, then you got a lot of other problems to deal with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. That's our wrap here for Sunday, our usual Sunday wrap. Boris Johnson, when will we see the backside of you, please? Okay. Anyway, this is the Goggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegoggle.locals.com. This is Sunday. That means George and I will reconvene tomorrow, and his first live stream is
Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Come with comments, criticisms, suggestions, ideas, opinions. Everything is welcome. On the way out the door, think about a little buddy, because I said, look, if Boris Johnson is going to make a comeback, then the least you can do is make that tip jar great again. So I mean, he's Buddy's not tolerating this. We want Buddy in as good a mood as possible. So if you have a few bob in your pocket, whip them out, dunk them in his tip jar. We want it to be this money pot, a bulging money pot. So we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve the technology, and above all, we might get Buddy into a better mood. It looks really nasty there. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.